Hi, everybody. Welcome to Third Space Live, a show that offers conversation, stories, and ideas around mental wellness. I'm Jody Pihl of Third Space Life Charity. In a few minutes, I'm going to be introducing our guest today, Mike Gawliuk of Canadian Mental Health Association Kelowna branch. He's going to talk to us all about Foundry Youth Mental Health Centre here in Kelowna. First, I will promote my charity and remind you can learn all about our programs and services at thirdspacecanada.org. You can follow us on Instagram or Facebook and watch all of our shows on our YouTube channel. Today's recording date is August 10th, I believe. Yes, it is, 2020. Today is episode 30. And I'm going to pitch this show off by saying Foundry Kelowna. Probably a lot of you have heard the word or know a little bit about it. But I thought I'd set the stage by giving you a few more key pieces of information before we introduce Mike. Foundry is a place, it's actually located on Kirshner Rd here in Kelowna, that provides a one-stop shop for young people to access mental health services. But in addition to that, it's not just mental health services, it's actually substance abuse services, primary health care, social services, youth and family navigation, and peer support. That's a lot, and Mike will help us understand what that's all about later in the show. There's other Foundry centers as well throughout BC, and within the coming years, the number is going to grow to 19 in British Columbia. And Foundry just isn't for kids. It's for people, young people aged 12 to 24. And maybe Mike will speak a little bit to that as well today, why that is, because it straddles youth and adult services, which is one of the great things about it. Foundry is a province-wide initiative supported by the government of BC, a few private foundations, but each Foundry Centre relies on the community to raise money and to support the centre in order for it to be established as well as to continue to operate. And that's where I come in. I have a personal connection to Foundry when in 2016, I was involved along with a lot of other individuals, groups, organizations, and businesses to raise money in order to open our Foundry here in Kelowna. Today, we're going to learn about what Foundry is today and where we're moving in the future, because it continues to grow and change and evolve. Mike Gawliuk, our guest today, is the Director of Service Delivery and Program Innovation at Canadian Mental Health Association Kelowna branch. I'm going to call Canadian Mental Health Association CMHA in the show because it's much shorter. Mike has worked in the nonprofit sector for 26 years and has been involved supporting youth, young adults, and families throughout his career. He's played a major role both at CMHA and establishing Foundry Kelowna, and is extremely proud of the difference that Foundry has made in our community and province. And he's super excited to see Foundry grow and evolve and help shape the future of young people in our province. While not at work, Mike keeps busy with his partner, Jody. She sounds lovely. Jody's 15-year-old twins and 11-year-old daughter, as well as Mike's son, Connor. And two dogs, I'm a dog lover, Jax the yellow lab, and Jeffrey Wallace the pug. Good name, good name. We need to have a dog date, Mike. So I'm going to invite Mike to say hello. And hi, Mike.
Hey, Jody.
I'm glad you're here, even though it's a Monday morning. It's great to see you, and I'm so glad you're here talking to us about Foundry.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So maybe, because you know everything about Foundry pretty much, maybe you can bring us back to 2016 when our community realized that there was an opportunity for us to get a Foundry, and what the landscape looked like and how it came to be.
Yeah, well, certainly, going back to 2016, I think it was in June of 2016 where we found out that we were going to be one of the communities that was going to get a Foundry. And the work had started long before that. So, I mean, I remember, Jody, when you were on the board of CMHA, certainly one of the key areas of focus was around, mental health around children and youth, as well as families. And the fact that that was a group who really needed those services, that the services we had, while there was some in our community, navigating that experience was like extremely, extremely challenging. And so there was a real emphasis put on by CMHA over the course of time to get there. And I think, leading up to 2016, there was a lot of goodwill within our community, a desire and a shared desire. And certainly that was the result of a lot of the work that CMHA and other organizations had done to really shed a spotlight on this issue of youth mental health, and to come together and really try to collaborate for something that ultimately was bigger than any one of the organizations involved themselves could do. And it just so happened that along that journey, we had the good fortune of meeting people from across the province who also shared in that vision and that desire, one of whom was Dr. Steve Matthias from Vancouver. And he's really the father, the godfather, the founder of Foundry. And in meeting Steve, realizing he was certainly passionate and had a vision, we just knew that we needed to be connected and where that was going to take us. And so there was a whole bunch of work that led up to even getting to yes. And then in 2016, we were told, yes, you're going to be one of the first 5 to go first. And that's when we went, oh boy, here we go. And so now we've got the green light, and now we're going to actually have to make this thing a reality and new ground.
Can I interrupt in for one sec? Just for people who don't understand what it looked like before Foundry, you touched on it. In order to get access to services and to find the right place for services as a young person or as a family, there was a long, complicated, twisted path often to get services. And there were all these different service providers that didn't work together, right? And didn't necessarily even communicate to one another. Maybe you could speak a little bit to that, because the model that Foundry uses is unprecedented. It's groundbreaking. And I think it's a really big part of our community understanding the value of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think going through that process, one of the things that I talked about is that Kelowna was relatively resource rich, but systems poor. And what I meant by that is, to your point, there are a number of excellent organizations in the community that are working to address issues pertaining to children, youth, and families. Oftentimes, though, those organizations are doing their thing, heads down, working hard. And so the ability to collaborate at any greater level maybe didn't quite exist in the same way. And so, what it looked like on the ground for people trying to get help was that, it felt a lot like it was a bit of a pinball game where someone would start over here, they'd go in and, the organization would take their information and say, we'd love to help you, but we're funded to serve someone who's between 13 and 18 years old, and you're 19. So you have to go over here. And so they would send them over there. And if that person actually followed through that kind of thing, sometimes they'd end up in that second place and they'd be like, well, we'd love to help you, but we got this huge wait list. So while you're waiting, you need to go over to service number 3. And so what often happened is people were just getting bounced all over the place. And we looked, actually, it was in 2014, I did a little experiment with Interior Health and Ministry of Children and Family Development. And over a course of 6 months, we found 65 young people, we counted, who were falling through the cracks doing that dance. And so that wasn't good for anybody, because obviously not getting help when people need it is going to be really difficult for that young person, but also for their parents. And if it continues, a situation that could be potentially treatable can turn into something that becomes a lifelong condition, and everything that can go with that. So the goal really behind Foundry and what made it so exciting was the chance to, for organizations, maybe lift their heads up a little bit, take a look around, identify who's who and how can we work together. And I know the goal really was behind Foundry was ideally that instead of making the young person and their family do all the work to find the service, they kind of would hope it would be a little bit more like a relay race. Whereas instead of just sending people on this wild goose chase, is very much the passing of the baton, and that on the side of the referring agent, we don't let that baton go until someone else has picked it up. And so the idea behind it was very much that. And now take it and put it under one roof and try to bring as many services together as possible to eliminate the reality of having to go all over town. So that was kind of, what our community looked like. It was certainly what communities in British Columbia looked like in terms of a lot of well-intentioned groups, really strong organizations, but not necessarily the focus or the resource or the vision around doing things in a way that was different and was going to be better for young people and their families.
Great. That's exactly what I was hoping you could convey to everybody. I think too, and we're not going to dig into this, but it's important for everybody to understand that with all the data you collect, it's actually financially a great model in terms of it saves money in terms of helping people, because young people end up getting to the right resource quicker instead of using resources they don't need, or that type
or
of thing.
just the time spent. And again, in 2014, we also were able to identify that when we looked at those 65 young people who were moving from one place to the next and not landing anywhere. We estimated that there was approximately 1 FTE in staff time that was spent just helping to push people along, to just not end up anywhere. So yes, there's a certain amount of efficiency that comes with that, and trying to reduce some of those inefficient systems to ultimately do what it is we're here to do, which is get young people the help they need as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and as a family who's used the services, the idea of getting somewhere, having a roadmap or someone helping you navigate is a huge piece. And knowing that you're actually going to the right place that you're supposed to be going to get help is huge. So yeah, we really appreciate that aspect of it. So I know you wanted to flesh out a little bit more of setting the stage where we were at in 2016, opening the doors in 2017. So maybe you could carry on from there.
So when we got the yes, it was a matter of then how do we actualize on some of these partnerships? And certainly, one of the first was that, and I think you said it in your intro, is that with Foundry, fortunately, came some funds, and those funds were to help establish a physical site, as well as to provide some services. Now, the idea behind Foundry was to be different, to be groundbreaking, to be innovative, and the space would look and feel different, and what was offered there hopefully would be different as well. So what we knew is, while we had some resources to do this well and to do this right, we were going to need to get some more funds available to help support building out the space, to provide a decent service on the ground, and then where possible to be able to adapt and innovate. And so one of the key partnerships that came out of it, and certainly where your involvement was with the KGH Foundation and the Not Alone campaign. And the Not Alone campaign for us, I mean, it was certainly a fundraising campaign, $2 million to help establish, operate, and innovate Foundry. And it really caught fire. I mean, the target was met real quick within 7 months. The other thing that I think that it did, which was significant, is that it got the community talking about child and youth mental health. It got the community talking about this issue, and it resulted in people hearing about this thing called Foundry. And the number of folks that I've been connected with since then, that have said, oh, I attended this event for Foundry, or, my child went there, so-and-so, was significant. And so that was one of the foundational partnerships that was essential to get us where we are. And then from there,
unprecedented, right? That was the first time the KGH Foundation had done something like that.
Yeah, I think it was groundbreaking work for both organizations. KGH had traditionally raised money for stuff and things within hospital, and here was a chance to work outside of those walls. And so a great opportunity for KGH Foundation and for CMHA to work together, to grow, and really to do the right thing for our community. Beyond that, when we first opened our doors, we had like 24 different partner organizations, and some of those are groups that we call super partners. Interior Health is one of those. So Interior Health got the vision early and basically said, listen, we have our outpatient, youth, mental health, substance use services. We're in, and we want to be part of this. And so they moved that team over to Foundry.
That's amazing.
The school district said, listen, what do you need from us? And they really opened up their doors to have access to students, to get information out to parents. We presented to the school board on multiple occasions, and we're also able to recruit young people from the school district into our youth advisory committee. So huge. The partnership with UBCO, and I know that you share that as well in terms of their Masters of Social Work program, whereby they've got long-term practicum students, and we have a model of counseling at Foundry. One part of it is, single session walk-in counseling, and the ability to partner with UBCO to have those practicum students come in, take the training, and then be part of the program and practice just allowed us to do more than we could potentially do again on our own. The other thing that was unique and unprecedented for our community is UBCO also said, hey, you know what? we'll do a course at the university based on child and youth mental health and specifically the Foundry model. And from there, we can identify who's most interested in working in that space and recruited students for that cause. So, I mean, those were foundational and certainly significant partnerships, but there was multiple ones across the board. And whether an organization provided a service at Foundry or whether they were involved in a different way, like the school district, in really getting the word out and engaging the broader population. You know, they've all been instrumental in helping us and moving it forward. You know, from there, the site, if you haven't been to Foundry, I encourage you to go check it out. There is a virtual tour online. It's something that you haven't really seen to that extent before. I mean, it's a beautiful space. Probably one of the biggest things around that was that we spent 100 hours, not only with our partners, but with youth and with parents, designing this place. And the goal behind it really was to make something that looked and felt different than your usual clinic. And I think, you know, everybody that was involved, and if you've been there, can say we nailed that. And the best story that I can tell about that is Melissa Fedderson, who was our original site manager. When they were doing the design and the development, one of the youth said, you know, we need this beanbag chair, the specific one. And I mean, a lot of times within the healthcare system and social services, people get asked what they think, but it isn't always taken and put into action. And so a year later, you know, in June of 2017, once the construction was done and we started to take people on tours, that same young person was in our group room, kitchen room, and sitting there, and Melissa could say, hey, look at what you're sitting on. And it was the exact thing that she had asked for. And so the ownership and the value that had for people. And, you know, one of the most powerful things that we heard throughout the process is that they called it, everyone said, our Foundry. They talked about it as this collective group. And as somebody who's been doing this work for a long time, it was the first time that I had seen something of that scale where there was such a huge buy-in from the community. It was scary because I remember during the Not Alone campaign going home and Global Okanagan, there's the ad on TV and driving in the morning on the radio, Not Alone campaign, and we're going to go, oh, what are we going to do once we actually open? Because it feels like the tsunami is coming.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next in terms of setting the stage for the need and the numbers you were expecting.
Yeah, well, and we weren't sure, but what we did know is, you know, the numbers, and there's that sort of stat that's put out regularly, which is the 1 in 5. 1 in 5 will experience it and need assistance. And so we looked at when we put our initial business plan together, we looked at the population of youth and young adults in the central Okanagan and how many there were. And, you know, what was that 1 in 5 number? And it was about at that point, we identified that roughly 6,500 young people at any one time would be in need of service. So not an insignificant number of young people.
So that's specifically mental health related services.
Yeah, for young people who would be experiencing a mental health or substance use service who would need some sort of assistance along the way. So a large number. And, you know, we'll talk about where we're at, but certainly since we opened our doors to now, we're right on the cusp of serving 4,000 unique individual young people. So that told us
those are great numbers. You're capturing and servicing.
Well, and so that's part of it. You know, you put the word out there, you tell people that this thing exists, and people tend to vote with their feet, and and they did. And it wasn't just youth. I think the unique thing about Foundry Kelowna compared to, you know, other foundries is that we also focused a lot of energy on parents and caregivers. And, you know, because again, that package tends to go together. So we really, from the beginning, made sure that we had supports available for parents, caregivers, whether that's a family navigation team, to some family counseling that was offered there, to different support groups, to a number of elements. And I believe we are well over 1,000 families that have walked through our doors as well. And
wow.
And so it's huge, and it's been significant. Officially, we opened September 2017, and we're coming up on our 3rd anniversary now. And again, while we were worried about the tsunami, it certainly has been it's been significant, and we've learned a lot along the way. There's been lots of success, and there's certainly been some challenge and various things that we're facing as we move forward.
Maybe that's the next topic we can discuss is where are we today? And like the title of the video, what is Foundry, what Foundry is not, or common misconceptions. Because I know that one of your colleagues, Sheila Turner from CMHA, was quite nervous before the opening. Boy, she kept saying, I sure hope that people don't expect everything to be perfect overnight because Foundry arrives. That this is a process, right?
For sure. And that's, I mean, absolutely the case. I think, one of the things, and we needed to be mindful of at the beginning, is that the idea that Foundry was going to solve everything, like that this was just going to be the solution to every single issue and challenge that pertain to not only young people, but the systems that support them. And so very much to Sheila's point, it was about trying to manage expectations. Mm-hmm. And I remember, early days at some of the events and people talking about Foundry, and I thought it was probably the best description that I heard then, and it certainly still applies now, was that Foundry is the place where people can start their journey.
The portal or the entry.
Yeah. They may not end up there, but that's where they would start. And so that the question would be for anybody who has a Foundry in their community, whether that's a young person or a parent, shouldn't be, where do I turn for help? But more so, where is Foundry located? And come in our doors and we'll work with you and we'll help to try and identify what's going on and connect you up where possible. So it's where you might start, but it's not necessarily where you're going to end. And
I don't want to minimize how big that is as well, because the fact that you've got all these partnering organizations and agencies that are all under the same roof, that's a huge deal. That you ideally, most people in this town know if their kid's struggling in this area, or if a young person's struggling in this area, that you can go here and they've got your back. They're going to let you know where you fit in the system, and they're going to try to help you get connected. They're going to make sure you get connected. That's a big deal.
And that's the biggest piece and the most significant piece. Of course, Kelowna being the size that it is, and this notion of a one-stop shop, I think it's important to realize that within a 7,000 square foot clinic, there's only so much that you can do. And to give it some sense of scale, I mean, certainly, and we'll talk about this later when the COVID piece comes in and how it's influenced us. But at one point in time, I remember talking with Ben McCauley, who succeeded Melissa in the manager spot, and he identified that at any one day there was 45 different professionals on site at Foundry, and when you looked at the course of a week, that was up to 75. And so that was, again, relatively unprecedented. And really the cool part of that was, whether it's a doctor or a counselor or an income assistance worker, there's so many different people that are there that ultimately could meet those needs. And probably best case scenario that I can describe how Foundry, when it works. Early days, we had a young person walk in, and he was a young adult, had come up here from the Lower Mainland, had moved up here for work. He had a history of substance use related issues, also anxiety, so was on prescription medication. And as happens sometimes, he felt like he was doing well, and he decided that he was doing so well that he needed to go off of his medication. And as happens, that started to impact on his job, and it wasn't long before he lost his job. So now you got a young person with a history of substance use who's now unemployed, has a mental health issue that if not addressed, you could kind of see where this could go. He's got a roof over his head, but only for now. So when he walked into Foundry, I mean, he started and he was able to see a GP who was able to have a good conversation and encouraged and I guess convinced this young man to get started back on his medication. So that was phase one, which was great. I mean, the difference between Foundry and another space was that doctor also knew that we had housing support workers at Foundry, so could walk over and could do the handoff. And because our housing support workers have access to rent supplements, was able to provide this young person with a rent supplement to prevent them from losing their housing. So that was significant because, again, this young person faced homelessness.
So I'm going to jump in there just for a second. You and I are going to do another show, I think, on the link between housing and mental wellness. and how
Absolutely.
critically important that is. Because if people haven't thought about this before, think about that young person all of a sudden being on the street and the cycle, the spiral,
Yeah.
and how that could end up. So that's important for people to really
Yeah.
think about for a second.
It absolutely is, and I'm more than happy to go into depth with that another chat.
Yeah.
Same young person at the same time. This was the Y was there, and they had their employment program staff, and they were able to connect with this young person, tell them a little bit about their program, and he said yes, and stepped into their employment program, followed it through, and finished and was back into employment, and so 3 things that he got by walking into that door. If that had been Kelowna a few years back, he probably would have got one of those things. Maybe he went to a walk-in clinic, got started with medication, or maybe he went to a community organization and he got help with employment or help with housing or whatever, but not in the same way that he did through that. And that was through one visit, they were able to do those transfers. And the difference, again, was significant for that young person, absolutely. But also how those professionals interacted with each other is different than what had been. And it was easy, and having that space was so important to help facilitate those relationships between the staff, because it's not someone who's across town where you have to pick up the phone and try to do that. It was someone that was down the hall. And so the doctor could go over and say, hey, listen, I've got this young person, you got 15 minutes for them. That certainly was part of what's different. I think the other cool thing about Foundry and the successes, and I think we've all across British Columbia created this, was that when it first started out, the vision was, let's start somewhere. And I know back to Steve Mathias, his vision was we'd have 50 of these things across the province, and any organized community in BC would have a Foundry. And for the first 5 to go, there was some pressure for us to show that this thing would work. And it really, back to Sheila's part, you're very much, because this was new, it's that notion of like trying to build the airplane while you're flying.
Exactly.
And when you take on turbulence, you got to hang on tight. And along the way, there was certainly a little bit of turbulence that came. However, those 5 sites demonstrated that Foundry had merit. And subsequent, there was more announcements that were made. And then most recently, again, the announcement that update more Foundry sites would be supported, which means, again, to your point earlier, we're going to have 19 of these things across British Columbia within the next few years. And what that shows is that, that vision, that desire, and that focus of Foundry has really caught on. And it's caught on in a big way to the point where resources are being allocated for Foundries to be built across British Columbia. And so one of the things I think everybody who's had a significant stake in this is proud of is not only what we've done locally, but the fact that we were part of something that, again, happens so rarely in this work, is being part of something that's been picked up and is now really a provincial movement. So lots of great stuff.
I mean, who knows? The model can be used elsewhere in Canada or beyond that even.
For sure.
It's a big innovative shift, I guess, in how we deliver services. It's remarkable. Yeah.
It is remarkable. And people come and see us from, have visited us from across the country saying, taking a look and how did you build this? And then how did you do this? How did you pull these pieces together? And the truth is, it was a lot of people with a lot of desire, passion, and a vision to see things done differently, which was really the driving force behind this, and has been significant. One of the other things we found, and we've done a lot of research at Foundry with UBC Okanagan through the Foundry Central Office, and there's a prof up in the social work department, Shelley Ben David, who's doing a current piece of research around why people access mental health services and the barriers to that. And I say this, half tongue in cheek, but if you've been to Foundry over the course of the last year, there's a therapy dog in training, I'll call him, by the name of Henry.
I was going to bring up Henry's. Oh my God.
And Henry's kind of like the star of Foundry in a lot of ways, because when someone comes in the door, they're nervous, they're anxious, this is their first time seeking help, they don't know what this place is, maybe they've been told by their parent that they should go there, or a friend has said check this out. Henry's there to greet them. And Henry's there to make them feel comfortable. And you know, out of that research that Shelley's doing, one of the things that she's found, certainly not the only thing, but just how different having a Henry in your space makes it feel, and how comfortable young people are accessing, and how that just helps to ease their tension. So I would encourage anybody that's doing this work, and certainly I think people understand the value of like therapy dogs and those things, that it has made a world of difference for Foundry.
And that's the cool thing about data, collecting information and listening to youth voices, is that ask and you find out information that you would have never have guessed. Like
Well,
how big of a deal this therapy dog is making in the experience. You guys wouldn't have guessed that.
no, well, no, we had some hunches, but for sure trying it out, right? And in some ways, and I've said this throughout the process too, is that a lot of these ideas are simple, right? Give people a place to start, a place to go where they can ask for help. But sometimes simple and easy aren't the same thing. And while these simple concepts on the ground make absolute sense, sometimes behind the scenes, the challenges with all these systems that get put in place makes that work so challenging and not easy, which is probably why in part it took us this long to get here. And it required that groundswell of support, not only locally, but provincially to make this happen. So
I wish people, and we can't convey it in a short time today, but I wish I could have the time, or give you the time to explain how complicated this model is, and bringing all those partners together, and the funding, which is always complicated. It's a huge, complicated thing that I think that where we're going to move next in the conversation is what maybe Foundry isn't yet. For the user, when the young person or the family comes in, it's really easy not knowing about how much it takes to make this thing happen, and how complicated it is to point out things that it's not, or and I think it's really important for people in our community to show some grace and be mindful that this thing is a massive accomplishment. It's very complicated. You're doing your best. You've got great plans for the future, but you're not going to necessarily have all your needs met perfectly by walking in the door.
no, and I think that becomes one of the challenges, is when you set up something that has these ideals and this aspirational focus, is that the reality becomes that you can't do it all. Mm-hmm. And I think from the early days, like this notion of a one-stop shop, well again, good in intention, when you start to look at maybe the community and step back and look at it as a whole, one of the things that I thought early days, and this is one of the processes we continue to build out, is that there still is a KGH hospital, and people with mental health concerns still do access KGH. There are other organizations. I mean, there's the university with a number of students that we have locally that are seeking out assistance, and other groups. And so
that's the navigation piece. When we use that word, that's what we mean by that. So
yeah, I mean,
how do you find support? Yeah.
Well, and I think, trying to be all things to all people becomes one of those challenges. And I think that's one of the risks that Foundry runs, is if it tries to be that. And I think the next step in evolution around what it is and what it isn't is identifying that we can't be all things to all people, and really taking that essence of collaboration and partnership and reaching out to those organizations and making sure that the linkages are strong. So one of the things that happened through the pandemic is we got to work more closely with the school district at a service delivery level in a way that we weren't able to while school was going, because it was just so chaotic. And the school district, along with child and youth mental health and ARC programs, were setting up weekly meetings. And that weekly meeting was designed to really speak specifically to individual young people and where they might best land. And so again, it spoke to that. How can we make the process less difficult and complicated for people by coordinating our work on the back end? And so that kind of work, our connection to the wellness clinic up at the university, and the liaison that goes on between there, those are the things that are going to make it look like, and I had called it a hub and spoke model, but if you look at Foundry as being a hub, there's multiple spokes in this community where you can reach out. And I think the sort of the antidote to that, trying to be all things to all people, is really for those that can't be within those four walls, how do we build those strong connections between, with those same principles in mind, whereby it's a strong line of sight, and so people aren't dropped, people are getting the services they need, and we're collaborating as best as possible. And I think that's one of the ways that we maybe address some of the challenges that come up with you know, dealing with these challenging circumstances, and some examples of some cool work that started, and we want to make sure it continues, so that that principle is in place, and that those young people do get the help that they need.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good fit for my organization, because Third Space provides supportive counseling to students at UBC, and starting September, the college as well. And part of the discussions we're having right now is you know, we're dealing with how do students navigate support services on campus, and then how do they navigate services off campus if they need something more than that or different than that. And of course, Foundry is the number one. What crisis would be the hospital or first response, and everything else would be Foundry. So building those connections to help people navigate is super important, because like we said, maybe other organizations like ours can help take the load off with certain service delivery, but at the end of the day, the navigation piece and connecting these students to the right resources for their needs is really important for us to work together as a community.
For sure, and I think, you know, that's imperative, and that's essential, and then resourcing it in such a way that collaborative work, that planning work, is able to be done meaningfully.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other challenge for people is just not only knowing what's out there, but that's even for the organizations, because things change so much, right? So the landscape of what things looked like in 2016, 2017 to now, organizations come, some organizations go, there's old services that morph, or there's new services that are launched. And so it's this dynamic environment that we need to continue to have those conversations to make sure that we know who's who, what's what, and continuing to either reinforce the relationships that existed or forge new ones. And again, ideally keeping in mind what the intent and what the vision is behind that. So yeah, the opportunities to continue to work together, it's what really helped Foundry get off the ground, and it's really going to be what helps us as a community to continue to evolve what it is that we do, and staying connected. That's essential, and we need to continue to make sure it happens, for sure.
That sounds really simple and easy, Mike.
Yeah, well, it's been 27 years, and I've just been trying to do it, and again, I think it's possible, but it takes a lot of work. It takes that desire and that drive, and I think the thing that we share, which is not just being happy with the way things are and saying, hey, there is another way here, and you know, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that way happens. That passion and that persistence is going to be the thing that continues to allow us to grow and move forward.
So that's a great segue to introduce what you guys are doing next. Another super cool, innovative service, Foundry Mobile.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so, well, you know, again, getting back to some of the cool things about Foundry, one was Foundry put in place a really good data system.
Okay.
So we're able to track young people demographically, where they were coming from. And this went back to probably 2008. Sheila Turner and I were at a national conference for CMHA, and we saw a presentation from Ontario, the York region. CMHA has a program called MOBIES, which was a clinic on wheels. Just so happened at the same time, the provincial government had put out a call for proposals for some capital funds. And Sherry Slattery, who's our fundraiser, said, hey, you guys have any ideas? And so we came back and we said, hey, Sherry, actually we do. We want to launch our own clinic on wheels, because what we know is, and what the data tell us, as much as a lot of young people are finding us, there are those that simply can't get to us. And Sherry went, okay, and put it together within a week, and we got the green light to move forward. And so the idea behind Foundry Mobile, and when we looked at it, it's probably not going to be a surprise to people. It's not like the Central Okanagan is this giant geographically spread area. But there are areas of this community where there are young people who simply due to geography, transportation, or other things can't get to us. And so the idea was for those young people that can't get to us, we're going to get to them. And so we're in the process, hopefully the final stages of the process of designing and retrofitting. It'll be a 37-foot custom coach set up as have a waiting room, one counseling room, and then one flex room that can be used for primary care as well as counseling. And we're going to start, hopefully we're going to get the unit in August or end of August, take the time to get it wrapped and make it look cool. We've done a lot of youth engagement, and then take it out to specific communities. So we were just on a call last week with the District of Lake Country. And what we're going to do is we're going to have it in those communities 1 day per week attached to a specific location. A smaller number of services, because of course you can't put 45 people on the bus and do it well. So we're going to have
who's
mental health.
on the bus?
Yeah, it's got to be a way bigger bus for that. Mental health counseling on board. We're going to have some sort of primary care, whether that's through a nurse or a nurse practitioner, and then a youth and peer navigation process, and really look to operate probably 2 to 9-ish in the District of Lake Country, out in West Kelowna. And then we were also last week in ongoing conversation with the West Bank First Nation, and they've got quite a large and beautiful youth center out there, and want to attach those services to the services for young people. And so we're just in the planning processes for a launch and a bit of an event out there so that young people can come see it, get a feel for it, and know that this is another resource that they can access.
Maybe it's worthwhile asking you to clarify what geographic region you serve this Foundry. Does it go as far as Vernon or Penticton? And if not, what do people in those communities, what options do they have?
So Foundry's catchment area, so to speak, is the central Okanagan. So technically Peachland to the south and Oyama to the north. Penticton is fortunate that they were one of the round 2 communities. So they now have their own Foundry, and it's been open for a while now. So anybody in Penticton can access that. Vernon doesn't. They were one of the ones considered for the next round, and from what I understand, did an amazing job and were close. So they're not able to access Foundry Kelowna. However, and this is a new initiative that's come through really through the pandemic, there has been the launch of what's called Foundry Virtual. And this is for young people from across the province. It operates now 5 days a week, Monday to Friday until 9 p.m. And young people from across British Columbia can access virtual counseling, virtual peer support, and they're also hosting different groups for young people and parents. So for those that aren't in a Foundry community, they can have access to some of the Foundry services virtually.
That's incredible.
And that was huge. And I know, again, as well as the sites, one of the visions that Steve had was to launch a version of virtual Foundry. And not that it took the pandemic, but the pandemic required us to approach things differently than we had. And it was an opportunity not only for Foundry Central to launch this provincial-wide virtual program, but it also provided us an opportunity to play with virtual services a little bit too. And so through COVID, we've moved a lot of our services online. We've had a situation where we'll still see young people in person, but we ask that they call in first to set up an appointment, because we want to make sure that we're taking care of everybody and that their health and safety is paramount in terms of their experience. So for those young people that don't live in a Foundry catchment area, they can access the services of virtual. And as far as our area goes, for those young people that can't get to our Foundry fixed site, they could have the virtual option. But as we found, some people are comfortable with technology, some people are open to this. And then there are some folks that, appreciate that face-to-face contact. And as much as, Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all the different, technologies that we've used over the last while have been helpful. I think they're a nice addition. I think they're a nice tool in our tool belt, but they're not going to replace everything that we know. They're going to be useful, and we're definitely going to benefit from that. But some people still very much want that face-to-face contact. And that's where I think Foundry Mobile is going to sort of fill the spot in between the fixed site and people not getting to us. And for those that aren't really either have the access to that technology or want to use it, Foundry Mobile is very much the space in between. And so we're going to start there. The other thing about Foundry Mobile, which I think is super important, is that just as we were one of the first 5 to go for Foundry sites in British Columbia, Foundry Mobile is the only one of its kind in BC. And it is being framed up as a proof of concept for the province. Because as you can imagine, as things grow and as Foundry gets bigger, it's going to move into areas where actually a mobile response might make more sense than having that fixed site. So as we did with Foundry, with mobile, we're absolutely going to look to prove that this is another way of making sure that young people get the help that they need and continue to move the needle and move this initiative forward.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I think during our prep, you spoke about initially the Foundry Mobile team will be out 3 days a week-ish.
Yeah.
And so you're still looking to, you also want to do some learning before you can grow capacity. But once you are ready to grow capacity, you can also use more funding. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. So we've got some, just as with Foundry, we've got some base operational funding, and that will allow us to operate for 3 years. The ability to scale this and offer more service is going to be a function of, well, A, proving that we've figured out the model, but B, having the resources in order to do that. So we'll certainly be looking for support around Foundry Mobile into the future, and what it's going to take to make that viable. I mean, with that, you can imagine the possibilities in terms of where we can take it to, how often we can operate it, and all the things that might come along with that. So super excited. It's a really cool project. I mean, we'll be happy once we actually get the coach here. It's sitting in a factory in Ohio right now getting the retrofit. And of course, COVID being what it was, changes all sorts of rules in terms of how you can get a vehicle across the border. But by hook or by crook, we're going to have it sooner than later, and we're going to get it out on the road. The other thing with a vehicle that's wrapped with, the Foundry information on it, the rest of it, we also see it as a great opportunity as a moving billboard.
Yeah.
For Foundry, and the ability to get it out to different community events for people to see it. Not only would it increase the awareness of Foundry Mobile, but just the Foundry initiative itself. And so we see it very much as a two-pronged approach, in that for sure it's going to get the services to people where they need it, but it's also going to make more people aware that this thing called Foundry does exist, and hopefully increase awareness and having more people continue to access the services we provide.
Fantastic. I'm excited for you. I can't wait to see it too.
Me too. The pictures and the information we've seen, it's going to look pretty cool. And as you can anticipate, for those that have been to Foundry, you see it. It's a little bit new. It's a little bit different. Foundry Mobile hopefully is going to tick those boxes as well. Just as with the site, over 100 youth have spoken into the development of Foundry Mobile, including what services are going to be on board, and they'll also have a say finally in what that wrap's going to look like and what it's going to look like before it hits the road. So that's one of the things we've really tried to stay true to, is that what we would call meaningful engagement is not just asking people what they think or what they want, but actually taking those things and then implementing them into service. And whether it's design of a facility up to and including, we've done this from the start, is sitting as part of the selection process for our staff. We have a young person and a parent that sits in on that. And I've said this to many people, it hasn't steered us wrong yet. They know what they need, they know what they want, and they're going to tell us, yeah, this person is great, or you might want to think about this. And so that's a value we hold certainly as CMHA, the value in the voice of lived experience. And we try to actualize that by providing those, again, meaningful opportunities to be involved in the things that we do.
Yeah, and I think it really does make a difference. I've been in Foundry a number of times, and it feels completely different than if you were to walk into a doctor's office or a government agency's office. It's youthful, it's relaxing, it feels like more of a home than a clinic, and that's really important. Yeah,
Yeah,
make
that was
a difference.
one of the main principles around the design of Foundry. Let's do something that was going to look and feel different. And from what we've learned, people are in agreement that, you know, we've definitely landed there. So
And I want to give a little shout out to Jules Galloway and her team
yeah,
who helped
yeah,
design.
Jules was awesome. And, you know, we like to put Foundry Kelowna up. You know, when we look at the other sites across British Columbia, there's some unique stuff that's being done, but we still believe that it stands out as a showpiece. And Jules helped us to get there. If it wasn't for her,
into that and making sure that there's science behind what she did as well.
Oh, for sure.
Making it a happy place. Yeah. Now I'm mindful of time, Mike, and I don't want to cut you off, but I wanted to make sure that. Particularly in light of COVID, if somebody's in our community and wants to access services, do they have to go into your office, make an appointment to come in, or is it virtual? How do you do it right now?
So right now, we ask anybody before they come down and show up for a walk-in to call the office. And when they call the office, you know, our people on the other end of the phone are going to find out what they're looking for. And we'll offer them one of two things. One would be a virtual appointment or a phone-based appointment. Or if the person prefers to come in person, then they'll schedule an appointment for that individual. And again, that's so important because a few weeks back, we had a number of people showing up at the door. And the first thing is we want to make sure that we can help people when they do call and show up. But with COVID, the ability to have that many people in one enclosed space just isn't possible. And so where we're at now is we will see people in person, but it really is through a call into the office and a scheduled appointment. So please, for those of you that are looking for assistance, first step is to pick up the phone and call, and we can sort it out ultimately from there.
And that's 236-420-2803. But right. I think it's really important for most people have access to the internet right now. The Foundry website, both the BC Foundry and Kelowna Foundry have an immense list of resources and information. There's so much on there. You could spend a day on there, which is great because that's another resource that people can access right away. Not only how to get services through Foundry, but learn more about stress, anxiety, you name it, it's on there. So what do your waiting lists look like? If someone in Kelowna right now wanted to get help, how quickly will someone call them back? Is it a two or?
Yeah, I mean, where we're seeing the most demand for services right now is with parents and caregivers. So the wait for service there is a little bit longer. I think we're looking at about a week or so. With young people, we're trying to respond with a session within 24 to 48 hours. So again, one of the things about Foundry was trying to get someone to see somebody within a decent timeline, and those are the current times that we're looking at.
So everybody understands, before Foundry, the wait could be literally months or months and months. So it's awesome that it's only a few days.
Yeah, and I mean, it really depends again on the volume and the demand, but we really try to get to people as soon as possible under the circumstances. And so
let's speak to the crisis aspect. You are not a crisis clinic.
So we're not designed as a crisis clinic. That doesn't mean that people don't come to us in crisis. But certainly if it is a crisis response, if it's an emergency, and there's issues pertaining to safety or those kinds of things, that's where we would encourage the use of KGH. You know, and that's really what that's for. Now, like I say, that doesn't mean that through talking with someone, a crisis might emerge, but that's not the idea or the design of Foundry. So if someone is in immediate risk or, you know, a threat of harm to themselves or whatever that looks like, that is where KGH is a good use of resources, right? And I think that's one of the things is about what's the best service for the person. In that case, that's when you would use that service. If you're just looking to talk about what's going on for you and it's not, you know, it's not a current crisis where it has to be managed, again, that's where Foundry can be of assistance. We would
brought that up specifically because I think that it's really important for people to realize if they're in serious crisis and safety, and health, well-being is an issue, you need to get help right away. But I also brought it up because you don't need to necessarily go to the hospital if you don't fit in that, in that box, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else to add or to tie this up before we got to go?
Anything to add? Well, I mean, ultimately, again, winding back to 2016, and prior to that, Foundry has been something that's kind of gone beyond our wildest imagination in terms of what it can be and what it needs to be. I think the excitement that was there has translated into a continued focus on providing young people what they need. I think to some of your earlier comments, there are going to be times that we don't get it right. And when we don't, we need to know about that so that we can ultimately do what we need to correct that. And, what I would say for the community at large, as was so important through that time, through 2016 to 2017, is we're still here. We still need your support, and we still, to be successful, we need to walk together. And as we do, and we continue to build our relationships and that collaboration, it just knits that fabric more tightly in our community. And the goal of getting young people the help they need when and where they need it, it just continues to become closer to that ideal reality.
Yeah. All very good points. And thank you, Mike, not only for your role in creating this amazing resource for our community, that for those of you who didn't understand what it looked like before, it's a game changer for most of our families that are in need of these services. So thank you so much for that and your ongoing dedication. And I know you're passionate about this. It is exciting. So good luck with Foundry Mobile.
Yes. And thank you, and same to you, Jody. You've been a champion in this space for a long time and have had a significant impact, and we've so appreciated that. And again, continue to do more of it and continue to do the right thing, and we'll be good.
Yeah, I have yet to meet anybody that you bring up the conversation around young people, mental health, and it impacts every single individual in our community, and that's important. And I'm really proud to be part of that continuum of care we're trying to build in our community. So,
for sure.
Now connecting people to you is tough. You guys have Foundry social media channels as well as CMHA Kelowna social media channels. So I think we should just post them all because you have websites, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. So maybe I'll just post them under the video. And again, not to be redundant, but the amount of resources you can find on the Foundry and CMHA websites is phenomenal. So please check it out. Gonna have to cut it there, Mike, but thanks again.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jody.
Soon. And just before I sign off, just a reminder, you can learn more about Third Space Charity at thirdspacecanada.org. We look forward to you joining us again in a show coming up soon. Have a great day. Bye, Mike. Thanks again.
Bye.